Hello and welcome to Deep in Pact, a proud member of the Duff Network, where we dive deep into our most Canadian work 5 years on. Coming up next is Elliot Diebold.
And that was Ruben Morehouse.
And we are back to talk about Arc 7 Void. Specifically, the first chapter of that arc, 7.1, which starts with the line, Laird woke, free of any chain, handcuffs, or rope. Which is just an awesome way to start a chapter and an arc. The fact that he's not bound up is definitely starts off with this vibe of wait, what the fuck's going on here? It's like this little mini mystery, and it is so satisfyingly resolved throughout the first half of this chapter.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, for me, hearing that they haven't bothered to tie him up or handcuff him or everything, it sort of raises the concern for Laird, which, or maybe, back then it was probably not concern for Laird. That's something that evolves throughout this chapter. But
definitely it does.
There's this, there was this sense of oh wow, they've got something big planned for him. It's a real power move to not even bother tying someone up, right? So it immediately sort of raises the stakes, I guess.
Yeah, it makes you think, oh wait, something's off here.
They've got a bigger plan, because they're not even concerned about him being able to move.
Yeah. So Laird wakes up, he's inside 3 concentric circles, and he's being interrogated, I guess, by Blake and the Cabal.
Yeah, it's almost more of a casual chat. Well, not casual. It's almost more of a chat than an interrogation.
A high-stakes chat.
and I mean, you're sort of assuming that this is partially a karma thing, and that's sort of confirmed later, but I definitely felt at least for the first half of this, Blake is doing this just as much to lord it over Laird as he is for the karma. I think at the start he is kind of enjoying having Laird trapped for once.
Yeah. And especially I assume the tables being turned with regards to him being the one doing the interrogating. So we get measurements of these 3 circles, and the inner one is quite small in diameter. Definitely much smaller than Laird, which means he's he must have been curled up in this circle or something. And he has to curl up in it later, which is It's a funny
horrifically picture. Designed, but yeah, we'll get into that.
Yeah, we'll get into how the various ways that Blake and his cabal are torturing Laird here, I suppose. So they offer Laird some kind of token gestures of hospitality, which he takes advantage of at gunpoint, as a way to kind of, I guess, appease the spirits who insist on hospitality.
Yeah, but they're sort of intentionally meeting the bare minimum requirements, which is funny, and especially because Laird's just still such an asshole about all of it. It was so fun to hear him still kind of being this smug asshole, and obviously that doesn't work out for him. But I love this bit in particular where they point out his implement / familiar thing is out of reach and he can't access it, and he's sort of oh, how the tables have turned. Now I'm trapped and my companion is useless, and he's looking at Rose as he says it, and it's just God, you're a dickhead.
That's a dick move, yeah. Why would he say that? I mean, God, he must just not even see Rose as human. I don't think there's any other explanation.
No, I actually don't agree with that. Well, he may not, but I think even if she was, he'd still be just as much of a shit stirrer in this situation, I think.
Yeah, alright. Maybe it's true. I don't know. Anyway, so Rose... Actually, I want to pull out a quote here because this is just a fun observation that I had. Rose, not smiling at all, said, "Yet you keep coming after us and you get bitten worse each time. What's that they say about insanity and doing the same thing over and over again?" And Laird's response is, "I prefer to view it as one long, ongoing conflict than a series of failures." And I love this quote because it reminds me of there's this subreddit called r/self-aware-wolves, which is like shitty people almost having moments of epiphany and being self-aware of how shitty they are. And Laird has this real self-aware-wolves vibe here, where he's so close to seeing the context that they see his actions in, and he just dodges it completely. It's great.
Yeah, I think Rose's response to his statement that it's one long ongoing conflict rather than a series of failures, like, she just responds with, well, that's convenient, which I think is the perfect response. Like, it's like, okay, tell yourself whatever you fucking want. Like, yeah. Like, I actually hadn't heard of that subreddit until you like wrote it in the notes. So I checked it out, and I had to leave pretty quickly because I was just getting mad. You know, it's one of the subreddits where like it's just idiots being idiots, and I think it's even worse because they're so close to not being idiots for bits of it, and then they go back to being idiots. And so I had to leave because I was just getting angry.
Yeah. Anyway, Laird, maybe check it out.
Yeah, I think the other one that I just had to call out, and this is sort of jumping ahead, but it's relevant to all this, is when Laird's sort of talking about what they've put in the middle ring of these circles, Laird says, objectively, taking this risk is more evil than the murder of 1,000 Molly Walkers. And Evan just responds, or, you know, you could not kill 1,000 girls? just like, yeah, that's just such a hilarious comeback.
It's a solid Evan line, yeah. So Laird and Blake are conversing, and Laird kind of makes this threat to Blake that his family are going to completely overreact to this kidnapping.
Yeah.
Which is a weird threat to make, honestly.
Well, I mean, it's like, you know, that's like a real, like CSI Law and Order level play by Laird, where it's like, oh, you think you have me trapped, but my friends are coming for me, and they'll do to you like 1,000 times. Like, like, come on, Laird, you're better than that.
Yeah.
And especially, so, okay, to be fair, the only other senior Bahame that we know of is Duncan, and so, like, unless there's someone else ready to take the reins, I'd be coming for Laird too, because, like, you don't want Duncan in charge of the family.
So all the other Bahames are like, oh shit, we gotta get him back, or else Duncan's gonna be in charge. No, yeah. And so Laird is kind of comparing himself to America here to make this point. And it's kind of weird. He seems to be, like, fetishizing American zealous patriotism here, which is a weird stance for him as a Canadian to be taking.
Yeah, but I like obviously I'm sort of generalizing and stuff here, but like I've always seen American culture, at least relative to some others, as like really celebrating grandness and like rewarding self-confidence more than some others. And I mean, obviously, given what we know about chronomancers, it seems like there's some overlap there, so I kind of get why he keeps going back to that. But what I really like here is, like, Blake kind of undercuts this on a metaphorical level, like as well. Like, he brings up, like, you know, America has like not really won a lot of their most recent wars, or, you know, they've won, but there's like an asterisk after the word "won" there. So yeah, like it's not even a great comparison to be making for Laird.
Yeah, it's nice to see Blake kind of being able to keep up with Laird's quick wit for parts of this chapter, getting some blows in. So Blake kind of reveals the nature of this trap that Laird is inside. He's inside the middle circle, the innermost circle, which is a very weak magic circle. And if he tries to escape from it, Pauz will be able to enter that innermost circle, and Pauz is ready to fuck with Laird.
Like, we'll get into the morality of this for probably a while soon. But like, I do just have to sort of say, this is really fucking clever. Like as far as things go, like, yeah, we're not going to be able to hold Laird in the circles, but it's like, so you come up with a way to incentivize him to keep himself inside the circles.
Yes,
and the way it's sort of unveiled is very theatrical. Like, at first it's just like, oh, 3 circles, that's weird. So like, I bet you they got extra points for how they fucking did this by chucking Pauz in last. So yes, very, very clever. Morally, dubious.
So yeah, should we touch on that now or later? Because like, Pauz is fucking terrifying. This is horrible. This is like a horrifying thing to do to a human being, you know.
Yeah. Like you've just sort of written here that Pose is genuinely terrifying, and I was thinking, yeah, and so's fucking Blake, because he's just standing there green lighting this, right? Like it's
yeah. It's Let's get to it. Let's get to this kind of torture later.
Yeah, okay.
We'll get to it. Yeah.
So one thing I guess before we move forward is Laird sort of is like, as Pose comes out, and this is like where Laird starts to realize that he's pretty fucked, and he goes like, "What are the terms you gave the imp?" And Blake responds, "They're written in the envelope. Rose's research again. Careful wording." And then like Laird glances at Rose. And I really like this because it's not that long after he just gave her that smug look. It's kind of like the only big mentions of Rose in this first bit of the chapter are Laird gazing at her smugly, and then, a couple hundred words later, Laird's like presumably fearfully glancing at Rose, just being like, "Oh my god, I hope she didn't fuck this up.
Oops. I hope she doesn't listen to what I'm saying." Yeah. Blake also takes this opportunity and kind of puts Laird on blast a bit for how brainwashed his kids / nieces and nephews are. It's really good to see Laird being called out. It's quite validating.
Yeah, I mean, Blake uses the term toxic to describe Laird, which seems very fair to me. I think that's a very good word for the situation.
Yeah.
I do think it's funny that Blake is like, you brainwash them with this Behaim-centric anti-Thorburn worldview. Because I just think that might be taking it a bit far, because like I don't think they needed Laird to make them anti-Diabolist. It kind of seems like that's kind of par for the course, right? Like I think he might be weighing it on a bit too hard. It's more,
well, yeah.
I think it's unfair to blame Laird too much for the fact that they hate the Thorburns, and it's more blame Laird for the fact that he's willing to put the kids on the front lines like that. I would think. Yeah,
although I don't know. I mean, the specificness of them being anti-Thorburn as opposed to anti-Diabolist. I mean, I don't know. I don't know if that's true or not, but it's definitely interesting in light of what we kind of learned in the previous chapter, right?
Yeah. Well, and that's sort of why, like, I don't know. I've always gotten the vibe from most of the other, like, the young Behaims and just most of the other characters, that it's very much a sense of, it's not specifically anti-Thorburn, it's anti-Diabolist. Like, I don't...
Yeah, sure.
I don't, like, I get the impression that if those Behaim children were tackling another person, or a person from another Diabolism family, they would have had the same kind of rhetoric and the same ideas, like, the same... That's what I'm looking for, like fortitude to fuck over the Diabolist.
Yeah. I think you're right. Yeah. So Laird is trying things. He's kind of trying to test the relationships of his captors and kind of trying to find a weak point, anything that he can use to kind of bargain or get his way out of this situation.
Yeah. And so I think there's a line here which is, I didn't think you were capable of this, Thorburn. That's something Laird says. And I just really wanted to call out that one specifically because I think it perfectly captures my somewhat mixed feelings on what happens in this chapter. Because, okay, like, objectively, torturing someone with Pose, like Blake does here, is wrong. Like, with little w and capital W.
Yeah.
But also, like... Laird has gone out of his way to constantly push Blake into corners and, like, go after him and antagonize him.
Yeah.
And so, like, while I do feel bad for him and think Blake's doing the wrong thing here, there's also this kind of sentiment of, like, if you don't, like, I don't know, if you play stupid games, you get stupid prizes, right? Like, if you keep chasing a Diabolist, you can't be mad when eventually he throws a demon back at you, right? Like...
Yeah, it's true.
He's I don't really like what's happening to him here, but also, he deserves the blame a little bit for being in this situation. He has kind of put himself here a little bit.
Yeah, this is interesting. Alright, we're in the morality play now. Let's talk about it. The thing I really like about it is, at least for me, it didn't quite dawn on me how terrible it was until it also dawns on Laird how terrible it is.
Yes.
Because it starts out being like, oh, it's Pose, that's bad, but, Laird's safe inside his circle, blah, blah, blah. But then we actually see what Pose is doing later, and it's so fucked up.
Yeah, definitely. There's the sympathy for Laird just steadily increases throughout this chapter, and then drastically drops. So yeah, the more we see of Pooh's, the more you sort of like, okay, Blake, like this. Okay, Blake, like come on, like we gotta.
Yeah, this actually might be too much. Yeah,
yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So one of the things that Laird brings up to try and kind of find an avenue is Molly. Talking about how Maggie killed Molly, presumably, trying to turn Maggie and Blake against each other. But Blake really doesn't let him do this at all.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that is partially because he has more or less forgiven Maggie for her role in that. Like, I guess we haven't ever really seen that super resolved. Like, there was a whole bit where he kicked Maggie out of his house back in, like, Arc 2. And then since then, he sort of talked to her and I guess never quite considered her a friend, but, like, he's consistently turned to her as an ally. And I think I don't know. I think he does sort of recognize that she's just kind of the reckless teenager who was manipulated by the adult who also is constantly trying to kill him. So it's kind of like hard to blame her too much, especially compared to Laird. Like Laird's probably the last person who can pull this play.
Yeah, I think it's a bit of a... I think Laird is trying to gloss over his involvement here. And Blake, I think rightly so, sees right through it.
Yeah, anyone else might have had a better crack at turning them against each other, but not Laird.
Yeah. So the next thing that happens is possibly the worst part of the entire chapter, where Laird says, "You remind me of someone else, Blake," and Blake does not take the bait. He just walks off and doesn't even want to find out what the hell Laird is talking about. I'm so curious.
Yeah, I was groaning as Blake was like, "I didn't take the bait," and I was like, "No, Blake, do it! Like,
take the bait, Blake."
I was like, "This is the time. Make a mistake." I haven't been this mad since we missed what Rose's personal item was. Yeah, we'll get into it. There's a bit I want to talk about later about some ideas about who Laird may have been referring to, but yeah, we'll get there.
Okay. All right. So Blake walks out, not taking the bait, and the Cabal kind of leave Laird trapped in the circles, and they kind of head to leave, but as they start to leave, Pauz makes the noise.
Which is a direct quote from the story of how Blake
that's what it's referred to as, the noise. God, it's so good. Which is basically like, I don't even know, like a horrible, shrieking, terrifying, screaming noise.
Blake just sort of uses like three awful things and says it's like a hybrid of all of them. So it's basically just all the awfuls. Yeah, I mean, this bit kind of got all the emotions like out of me at the same time. Like I was laughing while also being just generally terrified. I was like confused, but then also not at all shocked that just leaving Laird alone in a room with an imp wasn't like a good idea. So I was like,
who would have thought?
Simultaneously, I was just feeling like this whole gamut of emotions. It was great.
Yeah, it's pretty terrifying. Like, and this to me is where, the Laird sympathyometer kind of starts ticking up. It's inhumane. It's terrible.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, and even Blake is sort of like, okay, Pose, you can't make that noise anymore. Like, fuck.
Yeah, no,
like,
none of that.
Yeah. But then, and then, like, Pose sort of launches into this big speech, and it's, fucking horrific. About what he's going to do to Laird and his family.
Yeah, and it's bad. It's bad.
Like, Laird's just sort of sitting there and just being like, Blake, like, come on, like, you've won. I'll do it. Just stop, please. Like, this is too far. And it's funny how, the whole first half of this chapter, I was like, oh, Laird, you smug arsehole in your circle. Whereas by this point, you're like, no, Blake, come on, like, Laird's right.
Yeah.
You gotta lay the fuck off, man. This is too much.
Yeah. Laird is begging Blake to stop this. Because this is terrible. Laird says something at some point here to the effect of like, anyone would succumb to this, like anyone would go mad or accidentally break the circle. Like I can't. Yeah. And they eventually just kind of leave him.
So one thing I wanted to call out. So when Laird's basically begging Blake to stop, Blake just sort of remains quiet, which is already kind of bad. Like I'm already like, no, Blake, like he's right. And I don't know why you're not changing your mind. But what really jumped out to me is as Blake is sort of being quiet, Rose goes all aggro on Laird and sort of brings Molly back into it, and then like after that, she's also like, I don't even really like Molly that much. This is about Blake, so like she's very much just going on the offensive, and I'm just adding this to my little like growing pile of concerned for what Rose is turning into tokens that's getting a little larger than I would like. Like while Blake is not like Blake was not even questioning what he's doing as much as I would like. Meanwhile, Rose is like essentially doubling down, and I was like, oh god, like Rose is becoming a bigger and bigger concern.
Yeah. But eventually Blake does back down. He kind of realizes, oh, this might be a bit too much. And so he tells Pose, like, Pose, you have to stay quiet unless Laird says something without me giving him permission to. And that's the kind of tentative truce that Blake and Rose leave them in.
Yeah, which, like, okay, so obviously, like, granted context, this whole situation's still pretty fucked, but
yeah,
I kind of like this idea of Pose will be quiet if you will be quiet, like as a middle ground. Like relatively, it's a good idea.
It's better than what it was before. I'll say that much.
Yeah, the psychological torture aspect. Like I think the bit that really gets me now is like just knowing Pose is right there and Laird can't quite lie down comfortably. Like that's just Like you know, you sort of hear about like, you know, like what like actual spy agencies and stuff do for like torture to keep people awake, and this is that but worse even. It's pretty fucked up.
It's grim. And then Blake and Rose decide to leave behind the Tallow Man as well, just in case, I don't know, something happens, just in case Laird escapes or, you know, Pose does something. But then they leave.
Yeah. And so I mean, like I'm not super worried for Laird. Like, well, I am, but also we just learned last chapter that actually he's been trained by Rose Senior. So I am. I doubt how effective leaving him with Pose is going to actually be, because it turns out he's a lot better equipped to deal with this sort of thing than we thought.
Yeah, although, so something that a commenter pointed out that I quite like is Laird was also given, he asked for a bucket and some soapy water, which is like probably a pretty good kind of opposite styled thing to help deal with Pose.
I like that.
Yeah, so there maybe are Laird does have something planned, but I still think he's in a pretty, I don't know. We'll see, I guess.
Yeah, so like narratively, I'm not super worried for Laird because of that secret reveal. I feel like that's going to be something that pays off. But like, if I didn't know that, I'd be fucking terrified for him. But like, I don't know. So to sort of take a step outwards, it's sort of like if we go back to the chess analogy with Blake, Conquest, and their 5 champions each. Blake has basically taken Pose and Laird off the board for now, so now it's 4 champions each. But like, I think for Blake, like a 1-for-1 trade-off of pieces is a pretty good result, especially considering he has a plan to take Laird out, something to do with like the Behemoth's power, and then presumably get Pose back as another piece to play. So it's in the chess analogy, it's I guess an effective move.
Yeah, and I also think there are very few situations where Blake is going to use Pose, so this is a pretty good way to put him on guard duty.
Yeah, exactly. Like, this is a good use of a champion he wouldn't really want to use in any other situation, and he shouldn't be using in this one. But anyway.
Yeah. So the Cabal are on the road again, and they kind of make their way back to everyone's favorite location, the police station.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, I feel like Blake's going to have an easier time making the police station his domain than, like, his own fucking apartment.
Yeah, so I think it's funny that we didn't see... so Blake obviously had to come back to the police station, right? Like, that was the thing that he did. That he kind of promised to, I don't know, the captain, somebody at the station. But we never saw him actually go back to this person.
Yeah, well, so I went and read it because I had the same sort of thought, and he doesn't do it on this trip either.
Yeah.
And looking at it, I think all he really promised to do in 5, I think it was 5.6, is to come back to the police station. So I don't think he had to come back here at all, except for June. Like, June is literally the entire reason for this trip, as far as I can tell.
Yeah, fair enough. So Blake's making some interesting moves. Tyler's calling him out on it. He's basically doing some classic Bond villain things, monologuing to Laird, leaving Laird with a questionably loyal henchman. But Blake kind of defends it because it's good karma and good drama, which are basically the same thing, I suppose.
Yeah. This is pretty sensible in the world of Pact to do this kind of Bond villain shit, which is just a fucking fantastic idea for a world. I love it. Ty also takes the time to suggest a movie night that night, which is
yeah, get your priorities straight, man.
His mental health is either really, really good or really, really bad. It's one of the, if you're suggesting movie night in the middle of this fucking paranormal war, you're either in a really good place or a really bad one.
Yeah, grab Laird, grab Poos, and let's watch, I don't know, Shrek. So I want to pull out a quote because it just had this line that I thought was, I don't know, something, where Blake thinks, the streets were crowded, people doing their shopping in the evenings, and I could smell rich food as people grabbed late lunches or early dinners. I was hungry. It was easy to forget to attend to real life. And that last bit, that it was easy to attend to forget to real life, that just feels like something that's going to become really relevant. It just feels like a little nice pithy phrase that seems like it's going to be important. I mean, it's already obviously pretty relevant to Blake already, but yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't know. I don't have a response to that. Okay, I will keep an eye out, I guess. I don't. You're the one who's read the story. I haven't. I'll take your word for
it. There's one other bit I want to point out, which is just, I don't know, something. Ty and Evan are talking, and Evan says, Ty? Yeah. Batman would totally kick her ass. We don't hear the start of this conversation. I don't know what they're talking about. I just think it's the exact kind of conversation you would think Evan and Ty are having, which is awesome.
Yeah, it's a fun little bit of decoration, and I don't know. I know Ward has some references to Pact, so I've been assuming Pact is going to reference Ward a little bit. Worm, a little bit. I don't know. So maybe her is referring to Taylor or some other person from Parahumans. I don't know.
But I don't think Evan would think that Taylor would lose to Batman. That's crazy.
Also, I don't think Evan should be reading Worm.
Oh, it's fine. Yeah. Anyway, so one last note on this section, which is that Maggie kind of makes a bit of a, hey, can I hold that sword? Oh, let me just take a look at it with my hands. And Blake is, correctly, or I don't know, correctly, refuses to kind of give Maggie the sword. He's still clearly not sold on her, even though he doesn't kind of think that out loud.
Yeah, and because I think, obviously, based on how the chapter ends, this little segment was obviously included as a sort of reminding us that Blake doesn't trust Maggie thing, because it's been a couple of chapters, at least since that really came up, so it's just sort of seeding that idea back in our head that Blake doesn't necessarily think Maggie's told him everything, which, and then the end of the chapter happens.
Yes. So let's get to that. We'll get there, I guess. So the gang enters the police station, and right from the get-go, it just is like this tense thing of, hey, they shouldn't be here. There's a real ticking clock.
Yeah, ticking clock because of the Bahames. But it's not the Bahames. So that joke doesn't make sense.
Well, sure. Yeah, I guess.
So it's funny because right before they go into the police station as well, Blake also sort of thinks about Isadora, which is actually something I had sort of forgotten as I was going through 7.1 for the first time. He's like, Isadora's going to attack me today. And I was like, oh, yeah, shit, that's right. Blake has so many enemies I can't even keep up. And so you're sort of thinking, okay, Isadora's coming up. And then they immediately get in here and Fell's like, someone's watching us somehow. I don't know, but we just gotta get going. And there's this immediate sense of pressure. Yeah,
definitely. Now, Elliot, I have to interrupt our regularly scheduled discussion here because I have just found what that Batman would totally kick her ass is referencing.
Okay.
This was some on-the-spot Googling. So this chapter came out, on the 29th of May?
Yes.
Is that right? Something like that? 2014. About a month before that, there was a thread posted on spacebattles.com that was Batman from DC versus Alexandria from Worm. So I think that's what's being referenced here. Alexandria versus Batman. And I don't know, which side do you come down on there, Elliot?
Well, we've said we can kind of do Worm spoilers in this podcast.
Yeah,
right?
okay, so get ready, guys. Worm spoilers coming up.
for the next 30 seconds or so. If some street level punk can kill Alexandria, I reckon Batman's in with a shot.
Ooh, fighting words. All right. I've jumped to the end of this thread to try and see if anyone responds to, the thing that Wildbow posts about it, like a month. There's about a month between the start of that thread being posted and this chapter coming out, but it seems like the timeline kind of matches up.
Yeah,
No
sure.
comments. Wildbow doesn't comment in the thread, and nobody seems to react to his comment. So I don't know. Maybe I'm getting it wrong, but it seems like this is what's being referenced.
Yes. Anyway, so back at the police
to
station.
our regular scheduled programming. So they're in the police station, and Blake goes up to the desk sergeant, and they say, "Oh, you were already here." And Blake's like, yes, I was, but I forgot something." Some nice time skip shenanigans.
Yeah, and so he has like a whole kind of thing here about how, it's good that I brought Maggie and Fel because, they have the good karma and I give people the wrong impression, but because of my bad karma. But if you actually read what he says, he just sort of walks up to the desk and is like, "I want to talk to the police chief." I guess I'm injecting my own tone there, but like, there's nothing in any of his words that implies that he's saying this in any polite way. And we know he also looks like a ragged piece of shit. So I don't know how much he should be blaming this on karma. I guess this could very well be one of those like it's both type situations, or they feed into each other. But like just looking at the way Fel talks to the woman as opposed to Blake, I couldn't help but feel that Blake shouldn't just be blaming it on the karma.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think Blake kind of seems to forget how haggard he looks at times. So Blake heads down to the evidence lockup and reclaims June, with Maggie kind of playing point here to help convince.
Yeah, and she does the whole make a promise thing, which is a tool Blake has never really, or I guess is employed it occasionally, but like that's it's a useful one. The old lend power to your statements by making a small promise. Like all Maggie promises to do is put it in her bag, which
she immediately does, and then takes it out and gives it to Blake.
Yeah, not a huge promise. Whereas like I think the majority of promises Blake has made, like keeping June warm, cause him troubles, like having to go back to the police station again to get a hatchet.
Yeah. Got to make some short-term promises, Blake. Some really easy ones. They kind of start to head out with June, but quickly realize that they have company.
Yeah, some creepy floating women / maybe dolls. I don't know. It's just creepy.
Yeah. And I want to touch on these eye poster things. So there's this little cool piece of practitioning where it seems that the Sisters of the Torch and the Astrologer teamed up to make these like concert posters for a generic band that have these stylized eyes hidden within the design, and these eyes are able to, I don't know, distribute scouting for Blake. It's a very cool little piece of practitioning, and I'm always excited when we see cool new tricks from different practitioners.
Yeah, it's you're right. It's just a cool idea.
So Fel kind of sees it and is like, "Oh, this is probably the Sisters with a bit of the Astrologer," which kind of confirms, Conquest's champions are teaming up.
Yeah, well, Conquest is using his champions to make like cool combos, whereas Blake won't even give his Goblin Queen his Goblin Sword. So,
I'm sure there's no synergy there. Yeah.
And Fel's also running World Juice, so like, I don't know how well this Outlast strategy is going to be working out for him at this rate.
Yeah. It really seems like, I mean, I hate to say it, Blake, but Conquest's team just seems more experienced than yours. I'm sorry.
Yeah, well, that was part of his plan for some reason.
Yeah, let's get the day-old practitioners on my team. No, yeah, I honestly, like, Fel is pulling a lot of weight here. Maggie and Rose are obviously doing bits as well, as is Blake, but I really just feel like they just can't trump the experience of Conquest's champions.
And some are just the raw power. Like here's someone like the Eye.
Yeah, exactly.
But anyway, and then obviously we end the chapter with Maggie saying it's time for what did she say, Fire and Blood?
Blood and Darkness.
I might be getting my Game of Thrones and Pact mixed up there, but seemingly Maggie's now going to confirm to Blake that he was right to not trust everything she was telling him. And it got me thinking, like, as I was sort of finishing up this chapter, like, you know, Blake was talking about how, like, Maggie probably had good karma, and relative to him, she probably does. But, like, I don't really think Goblin Queening would be a super lucrative career, like, karma-wise.
Yes, especially not a Goblin Queen / you know, little girl hitman for hire, which is basically what Maggie seems to be.
But it all this sort of talk about Maggie and karma got me thinking of back when Isadora, like, sort of told Blake that his cabal joining him was probably bad karma, not good karma.
Yeah,
got me thinking that, like, I think we're about to get this reveal that Maggie being his ally is the same deal, where it's like, no, actually, that's not the universe helping you out. The universe brought Maggie in to fuck you up.
Yeah. Which, you know, I guess we'll see how that goes in the next chapter.
Yeah.
Because that's the end of Void 7.1, and that's the end of almost our episode for today. Before we go, we wanted to revisit some other content from 5 years ago, not just Space Battles forums, but comments that people left on this very WordPress post to see what people were kind of talking about and scheming about back when the podcast, not the podcast, back when the chapter first came out. Elliot, do you want to kick us off?
Yeah, so I found a comment by Raffinius, who is speculating on who Laird might think, or who Blake reminds Laird of. And so Raffinius's theory is that Laird has some sort of grudge against Rose Senior. Like he blames Rose Senior for something bad that happened to Eamon, his dad. And so, like, while Rose Jr., Mirrors, was reminding him of Rose Senior, he was maybe going to say that Blake reminds him of Aemon being corrupted by a Rose, which I just love as an idea. Like, I'll be very happy if that's how it goes down, because that's a great idea.
That is pretty grim, and if that's the case, it would, I think, explain some of Laird's anti-Thorburn sentiment. I mean,
yes,
your grandma caused the downfall of my dad. Like, that's pretty, you know, personal shit.
Yeah, it works, which is why I really like it as an idea.
The comment I pulled out was by a user called Ironsci. And so obviously we kind of talked about, I don't think we touched on it actually, but we in the chapter, it's mentioned this idea of deferring responsibility for bad acts being good for your karma. So instead of killing a practitioner, if you put him on a chair and hang a noose around his neck and let him, you know, take care of the rest, the spirits are too forgetful to kind of put two and two together and blame you for it. And Fell actually talks about how his gun is not this. And Ironside points out that this, you know, could be very intentional. I mean, Fell could have chosen the gun to use as a tool specifically because it wouldn't defer responsibility, right? He wants to get the bad karma from it because either it'll come back to fuck with Conquest, or, you know, it'll just fuck with Fell's magic and make it weaker, which is also a win, or it'll just outright kill Fell, and, you know, that's kind of a win. It's like a win-win-win, kind of, which is an interesting idea. And I think it's quite in character for Fell to do, to kind of constantly make the wrong decision as a form of rebellion.
Yeah, no, you're right. I like it. It's similar to this idea of, like, you know, the unnecessary risks with speeding and stuff. It's just like, it's those little chipping away at Conquest type things where he uses the gun, and it's just not the good way of doing it. It's the way that gets the job done, which fulfills his duty to Conquest, but does it in a way that probably just hurts Conquest / Fell overall. I like it.
Yeah. Well, that's the end of our chapter for today. If you have any thoughts on this chapter or anything we talked about, or, you know, who would win between Batman and Alexandria, please leave those thoughts in our discussion thread, which you'll be able to find linked in the show notes below.
Yes, and you can find more information on Deep Impact and all the other shows on the Doof Network at doofmedia.com.
Yes, actually, and if you want to hear more from us, we have just yesterday released an episode of our other podcast, Media MD, in which we are talking about David Tennant does a podcast where David Tennant does a podcast with somebody.
And that's our podcast reviewing that podcast.
Yes.
Yeah. No, I thought it was an interesting conversation, and if you're a fan of David Tennant or any of the people he's worked with, it's worth checking out.
And I think this is actually the highest rating you gave something that I've brought you this whole year, so you must have really loved it.
Yeah, it probably was. I think, yeah, I did.
So if you want to check that out, head to mediamdpodcast.com.
Yes, and obviously, we're here. This is Arc 7 of Pact, where we're a long way in, and obviously, if you've made it this far...
Not even halfway.
Well, yeah, that's true. It's a lot of words, and presumably, you've read them if you made it this far on the podcast. And so you should give some back a little and head over to patreon.com/wildbow and donate a bit to him, because he obviously made this story that, you've enjoyed listening to us yabber on about.
Yeah, exactly. Give back. But that's it for us for this episode. Our next episode will be Void 7.2, of course, which comes out on Friday the 31st. So we will see you then.
See ya.